All right, so on Twitter, I posted that I was starting to build like backgrounds and stuff like that for different like titles, and it seemed like a lot of people liked it. So I decided that I was going to create one. I have no idea how this is going to come out. I will offer it up to anyone that is a member of the channel. You guys can download it. But yeah, I'm just gonna kind of show you step by step my process in creating something like this. So yeah, let's just get started. Explore a wide selection of pre-made creative tools for DaVinci Resolve, like titles, transitions, slideshows and infographics, like bar charts and callouts, and much, much more. Link in the description for more information. So the first thing that I would do is I typically want to make some textures or find some textures online, something of that nature. But with the little background that I made, I used JS placement. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to grab that. I have a couple versions of it. I like to use the portable version. You can just search this and then you can download it. So you just kind of click over here, you go through like the different settings, kind of pick what you want or what you don't want. So I'm just going to turn that off, turn this off, and let's just do like boxes. Let's see what happens. So I can turn everything off and now I'll just have boxes, and then you can kind of change the bright, there's tons of different settings here. And then if you don't like this one, you can just click and then it'll create a new one. And there's a ton of different settings here. One of the things I'm actually going to do is the grid, and I think for this one we are going to do, let's do just these four, and let's try to make this as random as possible. So maybe not the whole box and maybe not the line, just so we get this like randomness going on here. And we'll take a look at that. Okay, now you have to remember that these are 8K. We'll end up making them a bit smaller just because putting all of this into Fusion can kind of get taxing on your system, especially if you don't have a lot of video memory. So let's just, I might not want to increase the scale too much, but let's increase the amount. See what happens. Okay, so maybe something like, I don't know, something like this. So then once I have this generated, I can just go to save. All right, so then I'll have a folder for it and it'll just save an image. And if I take a look at that image, bring it over here, we can see that it's obviously very big, but it's just a whole bunch of little circles and triangles or diamonds. I don't know why I said triangles. So we're just going to create a couple of these quick. Okay, so now that I have my textures, I'm just going to open up Affinity Photo, take all my textures, bring them in, and then I'm just going to make them a bit smaller. So right now, if we look at one of them, we take a look at it here, we have, obviously they're huge, they're 8K, right? So we're gonna take these just down to squares, and I'll just do 1080, 1080. So that's what I'm gonna do with all of these images before we go into Fusion. Okay, then once I have that done, I'm just going to open up a Fusion comp. Now, if you're going to be using this as a background, you just really have to think about how long your longest title is going to be. Are you going to be like my last video where I was asking a question, like how long is it, how big are your questions going to be? How long do you have to read it? And I would just kind of set this to whatever you think your longest one is, and maybe like a little bit of a buffer to that. So if you think like your longest might be 10 seconds, maybe make it 15 seconds long or 12 seconds long. But for now, I'm just going to leave mine as 5. I guess I should first go in and change my frame rate here. And now I'll go in and create one. Now I'll just drop it onto the timeline. There we go. And then right into Fusion. The other thing while we're going into there is I need to kind of figure out what my colors are that I'm going to be using for this. And I love this website just because if you can't think of an idea, there are so many on this website that you can just keep looking at until you find a color combination that works for you if you don't already have a predetermined combo of colors that you're going to be using. So I'm just going to quickly look through here and just kind of keep scrolling until I find a couple of colors that, you know, kind of work out for me. Okay, so I picked out 3 colors here. I'm looking at these here, these guys here, and these over here. Not exactly sure which ones to go with. I'm thinking these, and then maybe like some type of like a green, like a bright green in there. So I'm gonna go with these here. And the cool thing is down here we have the hex numbers. So once you're in Fusion, well, let's go back to that. You can just grab this number, copy that, come in here, double click, come in here, paste it, and then boom, you have that color. So that's pretty cool. If you never knew about that. So there I go. Now I have all my colors that I'm going to be working with. I'll put these over here. And now I can bring in my 1080, all my 1080 textures that I'm working with. So here are all of the textures that I've picked. So now we can start to overlap them with the colors in which we already have and kind of start to create some cool things. One thing that I really like is, so like let's say this one here, we can do a couple of cool things. So if you've never used this select, let's close some stuff actually. If you've never used the select tool, well, there's a few different ways you can get to tools. One, you have tools here. We can right click and go to add tool, or you can come to your effects library, come into here, and you have all of your tools that you can kind of just like go through and pick between. The other thing too is if you know your tool, a really quick way is you're going to hold shift and then hit spacebar. It'll bring up this select tool, and then in here we can type stuff in to get our tools as fast as you want. So here are the 2 tools I'm going to be using. One cool thing you can do with this is first we're going to take this image and we'll go into a bitmap. So if we'll view the bitmap here and we'll pick over here, we'll go to luminance. So now we'll just have a solid value that we can then feed into a fast noise. So we'll feed it into a fast noise, let's say there. That's going to be the lightness control or brightness. So we would just drag into here. If you left click, you're going to drag onto whichever one that you want to. If you right click drag, it'll give you a little selection so you can pick the thing that you want to put it in. So we're going to go into the brightness. And then over here, we can turn on discontinuous. We'll turn down detail all the way down. Come over to my gradient and we'll go into gradient. And now we can pick different colors here. And the cool thing is like we can say, let's get, let me just show you this. So if you view it here now, we can grab 2 different colors, right? So we'll grab a color and we'll grab a color. And we can see that as we move this through, we're going to get all of these elements as different colors based on how bright they are. And it's going to mix these colors. Now, these are 2 terrible colors to be mixing, but you'll kind of get the idea of how that works. Now, one thing that you'll also notice is that this isn't the right size. So we can come over here and then we can put in here. So this is 1080. So now we have the same size. And then there we go. So now we just have to figure out which colors we would want to use for this. So maybe we'll grab that color. And what was the other color? That color. So we can just click here and grab that and go like that. Wait, did I use the same color twice? There we go. So now we have 2 colors. That might be like a good background or something. Not exactly sure what I'd be doing with that. But you can kind of move these around and get, different effects that you might want. All right. And we can kind of go into these. I want to save this for later. And I want to save these 2. So we'll save these two because I want those two to overlap. That is going to be all of our like circles and triangles, and then these like little lines here. I'm kind of winging this. I have no idea how I'm going to do this. Typically my videos, I do at least a run through of whatever it is I'm building, but you're kind of with me live here, so so just copy and pasting that olive color, and we'll go right in. And the other thing we can do is, because this is just going to be a solid, we can go into luminance and turn this off and get 1080. There we go. And we can lay that on top of that. It's going to be kind of shitty results, but we can start to add different texture in, and we can also cut this with that. And let's go, and we can invert the mask, so now it shouldn't be so much there. I'm actually going to take that bitmap, go back into here, and we're going to crush this and drag that into there. So now we can see that we only have those lines. If I increase this, we only have those lines where this is cut out, so like where just some of the items are. Just add so much texture into this shot that we currently have here. Just so much extra texture. And this is kind of just one of those things, the more you play around with this, ideas start to pop in your head of, oh, I could do this, or I could do that. So maybe we'll do that, and then we have another one of these. Now this is completely different. What colors do we have left here? I'm not a huge fan of these colors yet. Still trying to figure them out. Alright, so the other thing too is what we're doing here is we're taking our image and we're passing it in as a mask to this solid. And then once you, on a background, if you come over here, you don't really see anything. But once you connect up a mask, you'll then get all of your mask settings. And I'm using luminance, so what that's going to do is the bright bits are going to show through more, and then the not bright bits, they're going to have a transparency. And then you can kind of move these around to get you know, the desired look that you want. But since now just about everything has a transparency, I can take all of this and drag it on top of everything and get even more texture in here. Now this might be a little too much. We can always bring this down. And then we also have all of our different blend modes that we'd be able to go in and do as well, if we wanted to do that. But for now, not exactly sure if this is the color that I want to be using. Might be able to do something with the bright orange, but bring it down just ever so slightly. And then maybe drag this into here. So now we got the bitmap cutting out the mask that we're then using for this. So we can see if we flip this like we did with the other one, now it's only going to be out here where all of those other textures are, as we can see here, or we can have it on the inside. So we have texture inside of texture, but not over this other texture. So you can really start to make things and get a very intricate, unique look. And now that this orange is here, this is not really fitting in very well. So we might need to come back over to some of our colors here and maybe use this one instead. I never use the eyedropper. And then we might be able to go value to make it brighter. Oh, geez. To make it just a little bit brighter. And what are we on here with the opacity? So there we go. Now we really have a detailed mishmash of things. And the cool thing you can also do is now that we have this, we can paste this and do the same thing, and we'll grab this as well, come into here, and now we can highlight just a couple of pieces if we wanted to. So we could come in and we could say, okay, I just want to highlight just maybe these pieces and make those really bright. So I drag that on top of everything, and now we can see over here, maybe this isn't working here. Fit. All right, where are we at? Right here, something like that is almost the same. So we can see right here, this isn't that bright, it kind of blends in, but here it's a little bit more intricate. We can see we have these a little bit brighter. We can always just come in and maybe just shift the hue just ever so slightly. Something like that, so that those are just a little bit different in color. We can always just come over and shift this around a little bit to get other things to be in here as well. So maybe something like that. Just something to get a very unique look going in there. As well as we can also, so before this stuff gets added, we could come in the middle here so that these play over top of what I might do is, if you've ever seen a circuit board, sometimes it has like writing on it. So we might be able to come in and put in some writing. Let's first take a look at this and we'll add it in here. All right. I don't know what kind of font to use for this, but we might have to go through a bunch till we get something that kind of looks like it might work. So maybe something like that, just really small. And then we could just put it somewhere. It's like it's almost has nothing there, so maybe like right in here. So something like that. And then with everything else, it didn't really do a ton, but we could just drop that down just a little bit. But you could add a couple of those, or just like some random letters and numbers. Maybe have that down. There somewhere. And we can just keep adding in other things like this. That might work right where it's at. And you can add more texture in there. The other thing you can do is you can come into, let's say this node, and you can do like the duplicate node. So we could take this right there and then come into this duplicate and then just say how many copies you want. So maybe 5 copies. And then we just do something like that. And we can put 5 copies all the way across. And you can move it obviously down or up or however you want. Okay, so that's how we would do that. Now, let's say we have our texture kind of set up exactly how we want to. So then the next thing we need to do is take this into 3D. So to do that, we're just going to make this on a plane. So we can just simply just grab right here and pull a shape in. And we have it on plane, and we can drag this right in. And that's just going to be added as a material, right? So now if we take a look at it, it's that same plane with our thing, but now we can move it around, and we need to get a camera. So we'll just connect our camera up, which will give us a merge, and then we can also grab a renderer, and so we can see what the camera sees. And we'll put that over here, grab the camera, and to move around, I use middle mouse a lot to move around like this, and then holding control down, or excuse me, alt down will rotate it. So now that we have that, we can kind of bring this back. And one thing that you'll notice is it's flat and it doesn't really look like the thing in which we were using before, but we're at the edges here. So one thing that I was using is the bend. So if I come to the shape, shift spacebar, we can use this bender, and let's stop the play. And now we can say the amount that we want to bend. Hello? Okay, we can say the amount we want to bend. We're not looking at it over here. And obviously that's not the right way, so then you can just come in and pick a different axis that you want to bend on. So if we look at that, now we're kind of going the wrong way, so we want to go something like that. Now we're wrapping around the camera. If we take a look at this whole camera view we have there, and I like to just kind of go into my merge view just so I can see everything. And I'll come into my shape and maybe tilt it like this, which is gonna make things all wonky with this thing. All right, and then we can kind of do that, and that's kind of how I did that. If you want things to get real big, you can also do a duplicate here. So I'll just move this down because I want to bend the whole item. So we come into here and we can do a duplicate 3D, and we can say how many copies we want. Let's just view just this item, and then we can duplicate it, right? So we can just say, okay, we want it to go to 1. So now we have it's duplicated here. And then, so now this, anything out, we'll look at this as one whole item. So we could do another, oops, that was a 2D duplicate on here. And we do a 3D, another 3D. Now it's going to be 2. And so then we could go down. But what I actually want to do is come into here and reset this stuff, because things are going to get a little wonky if I don't do that. And then we could bring this down if we view this here, and we'll go -1. And now we have a big plane, right? And then out of here, you can do a transform. Jeez, I keep doing the wrong transform. Do a transform 3D. And now we can move this whole item around. If I'm actually viewing it, move this whole item around as one item. Then we have a bend, and currently it's bending each one individually. You just go group object. Now it's going to bend everything as if it's one whole object there. And in this merge, we can now do like our rotations. So we can do something like that. And that's looking kind of cool. So let's come back to our merge. We can see our camera here. So we can pull us back. These lines are just showing like our view of everything. So if we pull this back, we can kind of see everything here. And now the cool thing is, once I see that one little arm right there, right here. Once we have everything in view, we'll have something that's really cool, is we'll have things at different lengths from the camera. So if I'm looking at this top down, we have like this that's closer to the camera, but it's kind of off to a distance. We have this that's over a little bit better. The easiest way to show this is if I come into here, and then on our camera, we can go to these control things, and we can see our focus plane, right? Now we can move where our focus is, and we can see, okay, wherever this box is, that plane is going to be in focus. So we would have this bit out of focus, but right where that box hits everything, it's going to be in focus, right? So we can see like where things would be in focus, out of focus. Over here is our render, but you don't see that at all. So if we come into our renderer, we would switch this type to OpenGL, and then we can come into the effects and we'll turn those on. And then we'll now see the portion that is in focus and the portion that isn't in focus. Here we have our quality. I would say don't make this quality really high, even though if you look at this close up, this looks terrible, right? And if we bump this up to, let's say, like 400, and then once this renders, as you can see, it's going to take a little longer to render this out because that's a higher quality, obviously. But once this renders out, these, this is just going to look a lot better. But obviously, if you're working around, you're not going to be able to move the camera with it taking that long per frame. So now we can see like, oh, this is looking much better. It's not so like steppy. But for now, I'm just going to go a lot lower just because it's a lot easier. So when we're moving our camera around, once things update, it's a lot easier to move everything around. We'll actually go, let's go less than that. The other thing too is here we have the amount. So it's kind of like the equivalent of your iris. So like how big is your focus window? So if we can take this down to like 0.02, and now we're gonna have significantly more in focus. You can see like this is a little bit blurrier and sharper in here. Maybe go to like 5. So we get a little bit of blur. Let's go to fit. Got a little bit of blur up there, a little bit of blur on the edges. And now we can kind of just take this bend and kind of bend this till we get a look that we're going for. So maybe we'll really bend it and maybe not so much like that. So maybe something like that. That would work. And to really sell this effect, maybe we can bring the camera down a little bit and then have the camera look up a little. So it's almost like we're looking in a little cylinder. So now we have pretty much that background, and it looks pretty cool. If someone really sits there and looks, they can see the JRTV and all of that. That looks pretty cool. It might be a little bright for my liking, but it's a good start, right? So now that we have that, we still have those two other textures that we have here, right? So we have these little circles and diamonds, and then we have like this little line thing here too. And we can just tie that into all of this stuff here right before we have it go into that 3D shape. So let me move all of this down a little bit, and we'll just grab this stuff and bring it into here. And now if we look at this, we can do a couple of different things here. We can, what I think I'm going to do is just grab a background, oops, connect this up. If we take a look at this, if we go back and switch this up, and we can go into luminance, and then we can make this into a color. Now we have this color, and if we take a rectangle mask, we can mask it. One cool thing that we can do is now we can have this go, right? Something like that, or we could make it small and have it go across, something like that. You could do a bunch of different things, but whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to have it go just like a wipe across. And I'm also going to do like soft edges. So right now it's kind of really sharp. So if I was to have it go like right in the middle, it's going to be like a really sharp edge here. What you can do is you can just soft edge this out. So it'll be like it's kind of like, I don't know, like they're turning on and off, something like that. So I'm just going to bring it down and bring it to the edge here. And I'm come to the beginning of my timeline, and for now I'm going to just turn off this view here and come at the beginning, click right here and keyframe the center and come however long I want it to take, 15 frames, 30 frames per second. So it'll take a half a second to do that. And then what I can do is in this rectangle, open up the spline, and we'll look at this displace just on this. And we can highlight all of the keyframes. It's only 2 for the start and the end here. I can right click, and then we can go to set loop, and we can go ping pong if we want it to go back and forth like this, or we can go loop, and it'll always just keep starting from the bottom. So it'll just go boom, 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 something like that. So I think that's what I'm going to leave it as. And so now I can just take all of this, bring it down to the end. And here is that whole image that we have. We can lay this on top, And now we can see like that right there. So we can have it wipe across. Uh-oh, what happened? Are we crashing? No, we gotta save. Okay. And then we could do a couple of different things. One thing that we might like is a glow here. So like these kind of like glow a little bit more. So that's with it off, that's with it on, something like that. Yeah. I think what I'm going to do is coming out of here, I'm going to change the brightness of this and kind of bring everything down a little bit. Maybe something like that. And then this glow is going to make it seem like this glow is kind of brighter. And that's going to be like the element that was going on here. There we go. Maybe this was a little strong. What is going on here? And then we have this last one. This last one, do a bitmap. Okay, I connected that up as a mask just so we got rid of that background. So now we kind of have those lines. I think what I'm going to do is click on these and then maybe increase the value, which is the brightness of that particular shade, just to make them a little brighter. And then we can also connect that into here. Now we have that shade there, which isn't really working for me. Not exactly sure how to get this to work here. Thinking maybe these need to go into like the blues, something like that. Maybe that just won't work. Alright. Alright, so that's kind of, you know, it here in a nutshell. We can now do a couple of other things. So let me just get rid of that so that stuff didn't work and grab this. I believe that's the, yeah, media out. And we'll go back onto the timeline. So now we're back here on the timeline. The other thing that I added here is a light leak. You can find the light leaks on my website, the ones that I particularly used. You can really use any light leaks and kind of figure out which ones we want to use. And just because it's one color, that doesn't really mean that's the color that we need. We can just go in and easily change that color here. So let's go in and change this to screen. Just like that. And I'll cut the end of that off. And let's go over onto the color page now. And then we're on the light leak right here. So we can come and we can change the hue. Not a huge fan of that light leak on this. Let's look through some more. Maybe something like this would work. Other thing too is maybe go back into Fusion and get some more depth of field going here. Everything's looking kind of flat. You could really tell that you're on one plane. I think I can maybe get rid of this as well. Let's come back in. The other thing you can do is come into anti-aliasing and turn that off. That really helps out things quite significantly. Completely forgot to say that. Now obviously this is like super static right now and it's not really looking all that great. We can add in some motion here in a second. So what we can do is we take both of these, turn that into a compound clip, and we'll just have to work on it on another timeline if we want to. And then I believe that you can come in and get like, so I thought it was here. Maybe it's on the color page. Yeah, there we go. Camera shake. We'll drop that on. And we'll get some bit of camera shake. That might be a little much. I'm still not a huge fan of this color combo. But since we made this into a compound clip, what we'll do is we'll come over here and we have our compound clip. Click this little button, click here. So now we can see multiple timelines. We can right click on this and now we go to open in timeline. And it'll pop open that timeline right here. So now we can go into Fusion now that we're inside the compound clip. And we can come in and I can play around with those colors. Maybe get colors I actually like. Cool thing is we didn't have to go through a whole bunch of iterations of rendering stuff. Just simply come here and pick some colors. I think that's fine. Now, that's quite significant in the amount that there is here, so maybe we'll just make that a little darker. And this is a little brighter. I think like now this is starting to work together and look a little bit better. Now that I turned off the anti-aliasing, I bet you I can come into here and crank this up and it'll go quick. Yeah. Alright. So that's looking significantly better. Every time it goes to save it, like, I don't know what it's doing here. Let's just keep it where it's at for now until I'm done with, until I'm ready for the final render. Come back over. Why do these colors look so bad? What is cached here? Wait a second. Something's going on here. Okay, that looks good. In here. There we go. Alright. So now what does this look like with this? So now this is looking a bit better. And we can go over onto the color page and maybe tint these ever so slightly. Let's go into hue versus hue. And we're gonna pick all of this and go over into green a bit more. Like that. Then we have this like orange color down here. I think that's fine. So the reason why I did hue versus hue is because if I was to just come into here and let's go back to like where there's just green. Or the, so if I took this and then I shifted this over, it would also shift over that little bit, even though we're like, whoops, we're shifting this into green. So instead of doing that, what I do is hue versus hue, and I just take all of the cyan and I shift that into the green, but then this red little bit still stays red. So that's kind of why I did that. Okay, so now that we have that, we come back over to the edit page, go into the timeline. This is the timeline on the compound clip, is the one that has that camera shake. And now if we would to let this cache, I bet we would have something that looks pretty cool here, where then now we would be able to put like a little title on here and, you know, make that look kind of cool. The only thing that I would do is if I am going to, because what you would typically do with something like this is you would create it, and then once you've completed it, you would break it into separate elements. So like the title itself, you wouldn't render with this background element. You would render the background element by itself. And doing so, because you're only rendering, 15 seconds or whatever, you could crank up that quality for the blur, for like all of this blur, so that looks really good. So you only render this out. It might take a little longer, but you render this out one time. Then you can use that element multiple times, and then you would just add whatever titles you wanted on top of that video file then, to really save time. And then you can save this project if you ever need to change the colors, or if you wanted to change this material in the background that you created. But yeah, that's kind of how we would go into doing that. One thing, I don't know why I didn't say that before, but just make sure that when you're over here and you're in Fusion, once you open up, whoops, I'm on the wrong clip. Once you open up your render, your 3D renderer, just come into the anti-aliasing, and you can just turn off the enable anti-aliasing. And if you don't know what that is, it just takes like rigid lines and it multiplies that line out, so it's not so like steppy. But doing that, it adds it's a lot of extra work, and for most stuff, it's not really that big of a deal. At least when you're working on this kind of stuff, it's not really that big of a deal, unless you notice it where it's like, see, like if we look at these lines, how they're kind of steppy. If that was really noticeable, like when you set this up as full screen and you can see that, you can come in there and enable that. And there's like all these different settings for the amount, but for the most part, you don't have to worry about it. And especially if you don't have a render system, that extra like level of quality or level of detail or whatever, it'll take significantly longer to render out a project. I'd more be concerned with the blur than I would anti-aliasing, just because like this looks kind of bad. If you can, put this up to even like 200, that's looking much better. If you really want to get rid of like all of this, you can go up to like 400, and it'll get rid of the majority of that. You won't really notice it as you go through here. But it, increasing these things, it just does take a little longer to render that out. But yeah, so that's what I would do. I am not 100% sure if this I should look it up, but I'm not 100% sure if this camera shake is a studio element, like if you have to have DaVinci Resolve Studio for this. But if you do, you can always just manually shake, or you could just go into because this isn't like 3D, like moving everything. What you could do is you could come into, so you wouldn't even have to make this this other compound clip, but I'm just going to go into here and show you quick. We'll go into Fusion now, and at the end of the Fusion comp here, we can add in our own shake here. So right here, because this is just a two-dimensional shape or shake, they're doing a little bit of like perspective, but it's not really that big of a deal. What you could do is you could just come in and do like a transform, and then in the transform, now this is only if that's a studio thing, but you could come into like here and you could modify with a shake, and it would kind of do the same thing. You would just have to come over here and like change this to like minimum 0.49 and then like maximum 0.51, and it would shake, and then you could just come in and make this 1.1, just so, or maybe 1.08, something like that. And then it'll, as you can see, like the box here, it's then shaking it around. And then you would just increase in the modifier, you would increase these. So the minimum, the center is going to be 0.5. So for the minimum, you want to start to go away from that. And then equally for the maximum, you would want to go the opposite way as well. Yeah. And then you have your smoothest slider and so on. But that's how you could do like, a cheaper shake. If like I said, I don't know if the color page has the thing. And I'm rambling at this point. You guys get what I'm saying. I'm just kind of repeating. But yeah, that's kind of how I did that. And yeah, then you could just, you know, switch up these colors pretty simply. Just coming into these background nodes, switching those colors up. And you could even go into like these text here and change the names or the numbers or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of how I created that little like background thing. And the more and more you do this, the cooler and cooler things that you could come up with animating little elements in here and getting little things like sparkle or flicker or whatever it may be. But yeah, that's kind of how I did it. I didn't realize that my camera died, but anyways, I will have all of the Fusion aspect of this project available within my YouTube membership. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions about DaVinci Resolve, you can always join the Facebook group. Some member in the community or myself will be able to help you out with whatever it is that you're having an issue with within DaVinci Resolve. But with that being said, stay safe, guys. My name's JR, and thanks for watching.